Hey guys, it is Carly bringing you day number 19 of my 31 Days of Horror, and today I'm going to be finishing off the Halloween franchise, finally, with Halloween Part 2 from 2009. Of course, this is Rob Zombie's version of Halloween 2. Nothing to do with the original Halloween 2, it's just his own sequel. And basically this movie follows the events of the first one. It's supposed to be 2 years later, and you have Laurie now living with Annie and her dad, and she is going through a lot of psychological issues, trying to get over what has happened to her and all the people in her life that have been killed off by Michael Myers, as well as try to cope with the fact that his body has not been found. She has trouble gaining closure because she thought she killed him, but his body was not found, so she is constantly living in fear that he is going to turn back up, which of course he does. Michael Myers is basically just kind of roaming around in this movie, trying to once again locate his sister and finish the job that he started. So that is the basic idea behind this one, and I gotta say, I've only seen this movie like once or twice before, and I really always just had bad opinions on it, thought it was not a very good movie, couldn't really get into it and things like that. So upon watching it this time, since I knew I was going to review it, I decided I'm going to fully engage myself and pay close attention and try to take it for what it is. And I have to say, I really enjoyed it this time around. Like, it's crazy how much more I liked it than I have in the past. I almost feel like I kind of let other people's opinions shape how I felt about this film, and I kind of knew about the mistakes in it before actually watching it myself, so that really ruined it for me a little bit. But when I watched it this time and kind of didn't really let anyone else's outsiders' thoughts get to me or anything like that, I really enjoyed it. I think it's a pretty solid movie. It just has like some big flaws to it that keep it from being a higher rating than what it is. Like, I would have rated this probably 2 or 3 points higher if it did not have such flaws, such as, of course, the dream sequence is one that everyone talks about, how the beginning part of the film is great. It feels like a classic Michael Myers slasher type film, and it's very brutal. It takes place in the hospital, of course, which makes you get the feeling it's going to be like the original part 2, kind of. And just the scene in the hospital and then out in the parking lot and all that is great, but of course it turns out to be a dream. And while I don't like hate the rest of the movie or think like, oh, that's very disappointing, I think the major problem is that the dream sequence goes on for so long, and it's the entire beginning part of the movie. It's like kind of, once again, like a mistake where it's like you're watching 2 different movies almost. It's like, oh, okay, now that was just all fake and we're getting into the real stuff. Okay, like, it just goes on for way too long to be a dream sequence where it's like you feel like that's the actual movie, and then bam, it turns into something totally different, which, I mean, it just kind of, I could see why it kind of messes with people's heads and makes them not appreciate the rest of the film. But if you completely just forget about that and then watch the rest of the film with an open mind, the rest of the film really is not too bad. I've always had mixed opinions on the Loomis character becoming like a total shallow dickhead who's like all about the fame and the success of his book and things like that in this, but I've grown to like it because it's it's totally the opposite of Loomis in the original movies, where he's obsessed with capturing Michael Myers and keeping the town safe and his family safe. This Loomis, on the other hand, is very selfish. All he cares about is the fame that he got from Myers. He lets it get to his head, and he kind of just deflects people's opinions on whether Michael's still out there and alive and all that. He's like, don't be ridiculous, he's dead. Things like that. He just really doesn't care about it at all until, of course, shit hits the fan and he sees that he is still alive. So I do like that because they took a totally different route with it, and of course the man who plays Dr. Loomis does a fantastic job. There's actually some funny moments with him, like when he's on a talk show with Weird Al and stuff like that, that is very enjoyable. And also I like the Laurie character and the Annie character. I think they all do a good job. And of course, Sheriff Brackett. I think it mixes well together, them all living together. You can feel like the tension of how Laurie's always freaking out and it's a big burden on Annie, and then Annie's dad is kind of just like trying to be jokey, like a typical dad type character. I really like that because he's like making dad jokes, as they call them, and things like that, and Annie just kind of rolls her eyes and can't stand it, and she's embarrassed while Laurie is laughing at it. Kind of reminds me of when I was younger and my friends would be embarrassed by their parents, but I would think they're funny because they're not my parents embarrassing me, of course. So I like that, and just the whole film in general looks like a Rob Zombie film. There's like, when they go in the bathroom where they live, for example, there's like writing on the walls and like posters, and then the place where Laurie works is like, it just looks like a punk type music video in some parts, or like heavy metal, things like that. Very artsy. Feels like you could tell that Rob Zombie had a lot more say in this film. He kind of made it what he wanted to, so I do respect that about it. Overall, it's a very good film. I made a status on Facebook, and I feel like the way I worded it wasn't that good. It was hard to put it into words when typing, but I feel like this movie almost, thing it suffers from is it tries to be a Myers flick and then like a psychological horror film about Laurie's struggles, and I feel like they should have just went one way or the other. Like, the beginning sequence with the dream is awesome, and then the parts where Laurie is kind of freaking out, like alone in the bathroom, and like her eyes roll back in her head, and she's having like basically a dream of killing people and things like that. I think that's awesome as well, but when you try to mesh them together and do the whole story with Michael and his mom, which, by the way, is definitely, like, that's the definition of trying to get your wife in a movie just for the sake of it. I do truly kind of believe that for this movie, I'm defending, like, Sherry Zombie in all my reviews, but in this movie, she really was not that necessary. And then the kid who plays young Michael, of course, looks nothing like the original kid, not menacing at all. All he has is long hair, and they thought that would do the trick, but that kind of really takes me out of it. Just that whole aspect of Michael Myers walking around like a hobo and seeing like his dead mother and his little self and the white horse, like, I just really cannot buy into that. And I feel like if they could have just cut that out and almost have this all be like Laurie's imagination, like flashbacks and things like that, and her just being in constant fear of him coming back, it would have been a solid film. So yeah, all in all, I did enjoy this a lot more than I have in the past, like significantly more, and I was pleasantly surprised by it. So it does, of course, have its flaws that keep me from giving it an extremely high rating, but for now, I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10. I think that is a fair rating for Halloween 2. So thank you guys once again for joining me for day number 19 of my 31 Days of Horror, and I will see you in day number 20.